Welcome back to the channel. Last episode, we put down a core hypothesis. Basically the first load bearing beam in our language ontology model, a civilization's modeling habits, and the direction its evolution tends to take may be strongly related to how vowel-driven its native language is. And yes, let me say it again before the comment section says it, for me, this is a hypothesis, not a conclusion. But today, we're going to do the part that actually looks like science. Start with a hypothesis, define the terms, build a model, test it. If you walk through that full pipeline, interesting stuff starts popping out of the fog. What do we need to define? Vowels and consonants. That's basic. We're not reinventing the wheel. The one term that must be nailed down, the one word that everything depends on, is what do we mean by vowel-driven? Because if you don't define that properly, everything you build afterward is just vibes. What does vowel-driven actually mean? Let me kill a common misunderstanding right now. Vowel-driven is not about how many vowels a language has. It's not more vowels to more vowel-driven. That's way too shallow. What we're talking about is this: when you're actually speaking, your brain is basically allocating effort, like a budget, between two systems. Budget spent on vowels, openness, resonance, elongation, trailing. Pitch movement budget spent on consonants, cutting boundaries, stops, friction, precise placement, tight closure. So if a language carries meaning and rhythm mostly through vowel energy and vowel variation, we call it more vowel-driven. If it carries meaning and rhythm mostly through consonant structure and hard segmentation, we call it more consonant-driven. In plain English, whoever is doing the heavy lifting for what you can hear and distinguish, that's who's driving. If a language is vowel-driven, what should we observe? If we want to model this, we need observable features. Not, this language feels poetic. We need, why does it feel that way? So here are a few tendencies you often see in vowel-driven systems. And I'm saying tendencies, not absolute laws. Tendency when wanting stronger resonance, lower or deeper. Sound vowels rely more on sustained airflow and resonance control. When resonance is strong, the sound often feels rounder, fuller, and longer-tailed. Some people describe this as lower placement or more grounded. The safer way to say it is more stable resonance output. Tendency, more pitch movement, more melodic behavior. If more meaning is carried by vowels, vowels are forced to do more work. So you'll often get noticeable pitch movement, vowel lengthening, peaks, and waves inside a single syllable. It starts to feel like the language is singing, not just clicking. Tendency to 3 softer consonant boundaries. Word boundaries rely more on rhythm. This does not mean consonants are weak. It means the language isn't relying on consonants to do all the segmentation. So outsiders may feel like it's all flowing together, hard to cut into words, but native speakers don't get confused because their recognition system isn't built around hard cutting. What about consonant-driven languages? If a language is more consonant-driven, it tends to feel like clearer, harder boundaries, stronger skeleton. Structure, word, edges feel sharper, meaning distinctions rely more on consonant placement and combinations than pitch contour. Consonants require very precise front-of-mouth control. Lip, teeth, tongue, palate. They're basically the language's cutting tools. One sentence definition. Quote this later. Versioned, here's the cleanest one-liner. A vowel-driven language is one that relies more on vowel resonance, elongation, and pitch movement to carry information and rhythm, rather than relying primarily on consonant segmentation to do the work. Good. Now we can model. The scoring model 0 to 100, we build a very simple axis. More vowel-driven guy closer to 100, more consonant-driven guy closer to 0. Then we throw languages into the system, run multiple rounds of GPT-assisted modeling and calibration, try to reduce pure personal bias, and we get an averaged set of scores. And that gives us this chart. Now, important disclaimer, this is a thought experiment, a modeling tool, not a ranking of better languages, and definitely not a ranking of better people. We're using one ruler to see if it explains any patterns. Red zone, 70 fuss, a strong vowel-driven. Look at the red-orange zone, 70 and above. Wu Chinese, a 9 of Cantonese, a 88 Italians, 82 fi Sanskrit, 78 Portuguese, 87 70 Twens. That list is interesting because a lot of these languages have strong ties to early concept formation eras, times when abstract ideas, philosophical systems, and large conceptual frameworks were exploding into existence. Quick precision note so nobody clips me out of context. Wu and Cantonese are not official languages of early ancient China. They're modern Sinitic branches, but phonologically they preserve a lot of Middle Chinese features. So they're like a window into an older sound system style. Ancient Greek and Sanskrit are even more direct. They carried huge loads of philosophy, logic, metaphysics, religious systems, and epic traditions. They weren't just grocery store languages. In key eras, they were languages used to build worldviews. So the hypothesis starts whispering something tempting. When a civilization is in the early stage, concept desert stage, when abstract categories and systems are just beginning to form, a vowel-driven interface may give you an advantage. Why? Because early knowledge is transmitted orally first, chant, verse, recitation, poetic compression. If you want people to remember an abstract concept, you need it to be memorable. And rhythm is humanity's oldest compression algorithm. So ancient Greek and Sanskrit landing in the red zone within this model, that's not crazy. The surprise. In the red zone, Italian now, here's the juicy anomaly. Italian ENS 82 is sitting confidently in the red zone. It's not like Wood Cantonese, where you can argue ancient residue, and it's not exactly like ancient Greek or Sanskrit either. Italian feels like a bridge language between the classical world and the modern world. And suddenly you want to ask a historical question. Why did the Renaissance happen in Italy, not in Spain or France, which expanded early and moved fast? The hard historical answer is not language. It's the real conditions: dense city-states competing, Mediterranean trade and finance, serious patronage, money, Medici energy, classical manuscripts flowing back, Byzantine scholars, monasteries, Arabic translation chains, strong urban culture, and education networks. That's the firewood and the spark. But what the model suggests is a second layer effect once those conditions exist. A high vowel-driven expression interface may reduce the cost of recombining concepts, aesthetic expression, oral spread, textual creativity, and recreation, because the Renaissance wasn't about building canons first. It was about rebuilding a whole humanistic conceptual system. What is a human? What is the world? What is beauty? How do we organize knowledge? How do we revive the classical into the modern? That's a concept reconstruction project. So here's the metaphor: money and cities start the fire. Language is the wind. It doesn't light the match, but it can decide how fast the fire becomes a storm. Green zone 35 to 70 is the mixed interface. Alright, now we shift to the 35-70 range, the green zone. This zone is fascinating because it's not pure poetry, and it's not pure skeleton. It's the mixed interface. It can talk concepts and build organization. It can express and execute. And the key sample here is Latin 69. In our model, when early, classic civilization languages, are generally more vowel-leaning. 69 is already pretty consonant strong for that era. So what does that push a civilization toward? Here's the simplest story version. Latin feels like a language built for institutions, law, administration, army, and organizational clarity. Not that it can't do ideas, but it's very good at turning ideas into rules, commands, procedures, standardized forms. And that maps beautifully onto Rome's path. Rome's superpower wasn't deepest philosophy. It was organization at scale, legions, roads, and logistics, legal frameworks, administrative control. Rome's expansion often looked less like parading and more like system replication. So inside this model, when the interface gets harder, edged, and more structural, it may nudge civilizations toward military, administrative, institutional expansion. Not because language causes conquest, but because language can lower the friction for certain organizational styles. A quick data point: the deep blue side on the more consonant-heavy end, the chart lists Arabic 25, Hebrew A38, Russian 30, German 35, English 48, and yes, you can feel a historical trend here as societies move into heavy industry, science, engineering, and global coordination. Languages that support standardization and low ambiguity become powerful tools. The medieval shock: Mongolian 50 in the medieval era, Mongolian sits around 50 here, mid-green. But historically, the Mongol Empire showed extreme organizational expansion capacity. That's a reminder civilization outcomes are never single variable. Language is one interface. Expansion depends on military tech, mobility, logistics, command structure, and political strategy. Still, the pattern remains interesting. Early read zone civilizations often excel at generating deep conceptual systems. Steppe empires often excel at connecting territory, integrating resources, and reorganizing the world by force. Those are different strengths. The modern shock, English 40, becomes the global interface. Now the most dramatic modern sample, English 40, basically near the edge of the blue zone, becomes the global interface. And that makes sense if your civilization is operating inside industrialization, science, engineering, global collaboration in that stage. What matters is clarity, standardization, reuse, low ambiguity, protocol-like precision. And English, plus the historical superstructure around its Britain, then the US, became the default global protocol stack. Now here's where my controversial claim begins. And yes, I'm doing this on purpose because it matters. As human civilization makes major leaps, the center of gravity of the dominant interface tends to drift toward the blue side. But if you go too deep into blue, the story changes again. Germany, Russia, and the blue zone pressure. Look at the sequence. English 40s wins globally, German 35s, even more structural, Russian 33, even more structural. You can almost feel the historical pressure, Germany's rise, then the clash with the Anglophone world, and the failure. Russia's rise, then the Cold War clash with the Anglophone world, and the failure. Now here's the key distinction I want to make. And I'm going to define it so it's clear when I say some civilizational systems show weaker originality. I am not saying they didn't invent things. I am not saying they made no contributions. That's obviously false. What I mean is civilization-level originality, the ability to spontaneously generate a brand new world model, a new knowledge paradigm, a new organizational form, and then keep pushing it forward into a self-reinforcing, self-contained civilizational system, not upgrading inside someone else's framework, not brilliant improvements and adaptations. I mean paradigm creation at civilizational scale, by that definition, yes. I think the Russian and Arabophone civilizational trajectories contributed massively to humanity, but that the number of modern civilization scale paradigm launches that permanently reset the global knowledge system is less prominent. And that matters when you're trying to explain why, in modern large-scale competition, they often end up at a disadvantage against the Anglophone interface. That's my claim. Disagree if you want, but disagree with the definition first. The fun special case Japanese 4-8. Alright? Now for a genuinely fun 1E Japanese 48. Look at where it sits, not red, not blue. Right in the middle, slightly green. And that's why Japan is such a perfect civilization interface demo. It behaves like an amphibious adapter. It can align with the East. And it can pivot to the West. It can install the Chinese plugin, and it can install the Western plugin. And when it installs them, it doesn't just display them. It actually runs them. It's like a system that's weirdly good at importing the strongest framework and making it operational. So let's tell the story, because yes, you're right, we need more story. Act 1T, the 7th century, Japan copies the strongest homework. In the 7th century, China is the Tang dynasty, one of the most advanced states on the planet. Japan repeatedly sends Kentashi missions to Tang China. Don't underestimate that phrase. This is basically Japan's version of a national level program, study abroad, EPS technology transfer, SA institutional importation. Tang China is the East Asian super server. Chang'an is an international metropolis. Law, religion, technology, administration, culture. Japan's mindset is brutally practical. What can't bootstrap this from scratch fast enough? Let's copy the best. So they cross the sea, students, monks, officials, technicians, risking shipwrecks. To bring back writing systems, kanji, legal and administrative frameworks are Ritsuri, city planning Buddhism as a civilizational institution, aesthetics and etiquette. What civilized even looks like? Why did Nara and Kyoto resemble Chang'an? Because they were basically built by Tang design, and some people didn't even come back. I've no Nakamaro, for example, Japanese who became an official in Tang China, the ancient version of high-end talent migration. So early on, Japan didn't grow purely native. It upgraded by aligning itself with the strongest existing civilization. Act 2. Ganjin, Jianzhen. Installing the core operating system, sending missions wasn't enough, because the hardest thing to move isn't tools. It's the core operating system. For Japan, Buddhism wasn't just religion. It was education, ethics, organization, legitimacy, cultural canon. So Japanese monks request a true ordination lineage, and they invite Jianzhen Ganjin in Japanese. And the story is insane. He attempts the journey 6 times. Storms, shipwrecks, drifting, failure, and he eventually goes blind. Imagine that an old monk, blind, still crossing the sea, not for tourism, but to install a civilizational module. Around 753, he arrives in Nara, establishes ordination platforms, transmits the lineage, builds what becomes T-Shu-Dei-Ji. That's a hard sentence. Japan imported not just information, but spiritual infrastructure as a system. Modern analogy, the missions brought files and institutions. Ganjin installed the core components. One is moving hard drives, the other is installing the OS. Act 3Z around 1842. Japan realizes the ocean is a highway now. Fast forward about 1,000 years. You asked for around 1842. That's a perfect pivot point. 1842, the First Opium War ends. Qing China gets hit by industrial Britain so hard it's basically a civilizational wake-up slap. Japan sees that and goes, so the ocean isn't a wall. It's their highway. If they can punch into China, they can punch into us. Japan at that time looks peaceful on the surface, But underneath its cracking samurai, income is fixed, but the market economy grows. Samurai get poorer, merchants get richer, the 1830s bring major famine, temper famine, social unrest, uprisings, the shogunate attempts the temper reforms, 1841 to 1843, trying to cut costs and clamp society, and it triggers backlash, external pressure rises. Internal stability drops. That's what an inflection point smells like, and in 1842 the shogunate does something symbolic. It softens treatment of distressed foreign ships, give water, give firewood, then send them away. Translation: we don't want smoke with you. Movie line version: Japan thought isolation was safety. After 1842, it realizes isolation is only safety until you get targeted. Act 4, 1853, and after, system reinstall Meiji. Then the real shock, 1853, the black ships. At that point, Japan understands the global main interface has changed. It's not the East Asian classical system anymore. It's industrial Western modernity. And Japan makes a very Japanese decision: no pride first. Survival first. We live by upgrading. And upgrading means learn the strongest system. So, after Meiji, what you see is not slow reform. It's basically a system reinstalls modern military and conscription, modern education, industrial base, the Iwakura mission to Europe and the US. Copy at source. Importing law, finance, administration, technology, then localizing it, and this is where the 48 score becomes narratively powerful. A middle-range interface may be more compatible with external frameworks. Not too self-sealed in its own aesthetic universe, not too rigid to adapt, but portable, like a system that can run different operating environments. That's why Japan is a civilization adapter story. Wrap up. So today we did a big overview and we used Japan as a special case to show what this model can hint at. In the next few episodes, I want to do short, sharp dissections of major languages and the civilizations they tend to represent. Not academically, but usefully. And then we'll finally start cutting into the real core. I originally thought I'd finish the setup in 5 episodes. But once you start talking about civilization, you realize it never ends. And honestly, I didn't even want to talk history. But the more you try to avoid it, the more you realize you can't explain anything without it. And I'm not talking about random facts. I'm talking about education. Real scholarship. Facts are training. Scholarship is education. Those are not the same thing. Some people say, nobody cares about scholarship anymore. Just give me something I can use tomorrow. We'll do those practical knowledge episodes too. But right now, I still want to finish this task to build the framework. Alright, that's it for today. See you in the next episode.